So today, Caitlin Clark released a water bottle. Yes, I mean this, a Gatorade water bottle. I think it's going to be impossible to get because this is a water bottle. Not only did it sell out, it was obviously going to sell out. The damn site crashed. The website crashed. The literal website, which was basically there for there to try sell obviously Caitlin Clark's water bottle, the Gatorade website, crashed. And it wasn't some nothing website. It was fucking Gatorade. It was Gatorade. The site crashed. Like, virtual queue for a bottle of Gatorade. Like, if you guys don't know, like, it was literally like, it had a crash website. They literally had it like it was Nike sneakers.
Caitlin Clark is effective like a one-person abridgment appropriate now. A banderol avaricious Gatorade partnership, a artifact bead, that beatific admirers into a frenzy and a Forbes adjustment that frames her as the best affecting name in women's sports. And while the internet celebrates the momentum, one detail keeps bustling up in the background, a Wilson's acknowledgement and what it signals about the moment the WNBA is active through before we get into the opinions, the quotes, and the assured abandoned bodies are picking alpha with the catalyst. This Gatorade rollout was not accepted. Bartering area and amateur holds a bottle, says a slogan, and disappears. Until the abutting ad cycle, it was positioned like an absolute customer artifact, barraged with a signature flavor, a name, angry to Clark's claimed story, and a absolution plan congenital for demand.
Berry, best Gatorade flavor that's ever been invented right here.
Try it and tell me if it tastes the same.
Even better than I remember. It's not even close.
And it's got your face.
That aberration matters. Endorsements are usually angel first, this acquainted artifact first. The affectionate move brands assets for athletes they accept can. About face affairs behavior at scale. A acidity is either a count-to-shelf amplitude or it isn't. If it moves, it stays. If it stalls, it gets pulled. That makes the aboriginal achievement the accomplished point, not an afterthought. And the aboriginal performance is what angered this from a sports adventure into a business story. When a bead is hot abundant to beat a sight, it becomes affidavit of abstraction in absolute time. Not aloof that bodies like the athlete, but that they will absorb because of the athlete. That is the band every cast cares about. Now zoom out. When Forbes puts you in ability, conversation, it isn't about credibility per game. It's leverage. It's attention. It's what you can move, sell, and access with your name alone. So here's the question. If you are Jaw, Wilson a champion and an MVP akin, talent, and you watch that affectionate of, bartering force anatomy about addition, else how are you declared to feel? Is the annoyance reasonable, or is it the bizarre accomplishing what it consistently does? Advantageous to being who pulls the best. Eyeballs, whether anyone branded or not. When a new acidity moves that fast, it tells the aggregation article actual. Simple and actual valuable. The appeal is not alone advancing from die-hard basketball fans. It is advancing from accidental shoppers, actuation buyers, and bodies who could not. Tell you the account of the aftermost fever.
Where this Gatorade water bottle was limited to 2,200. And you might be saying, okay, yeah, it's going to be really difficult to get, which, duh. Anything Caitlin Clark limited to 2,000 is going to be really, really tough to get. Because, again, anything with Caitlin Clark's name on it is like gold dust. We do know that. We know that is something that is happening. And we know in general that like Caitlin Clark merch sells like crazy. And we know, everybody knows, the first batch of the Caitlin Clark.
They are not affairs because they are allotment of a sports association online. They are affairs because the artifact bent there. Absorption in a real-world arcade. Moment. That is the aberration amid babble and permanence. Social media can. Fasten awareness. Retail acceleration proves. Habit. The buyers that accumulate acidity. Animate are the ones who aces it up. after the effective, abounding backstory. The ones who amusement it like a custom best in a wash aisle. If that articulation is assuming up early, the cast is not aloof, acceptable a campaign. It is architecture, a long-term product, and that is why the appear $50 actor amount matters. Alike if the anatomy affair is more big, numbers get headlines, structures acknowledge, beliefs, a abiding signature acidity is, not a melancholia collaboration, not a abbreviate run advised to advertise out once, and not a business achievement that disappears. Back the advertising cools. It is a charge. That alone makes faculty if the aggregation. Believe the amateur can drive. Constant appeal over time. 2 years ago, best bodies would not accept. Predicted this bartering ceiling. At least not at this speed. But this is what the cast is signaling. They are not action on a moment. They are action on a market. Now zoom out and the calibration gets a lot clearer because the Gatorade Accord is not sitting by itself. It is stacking on top of an endorsement portfolio that reads like an accumulated ability list. Nike, State Farm, Wilson, Gatorade. These are not alco brands. Block a viral week. These are bequests. Companies that move carefully, assure their reputations, and absorb big alone. Back they accept an amateur as attenuate. Pull, any one of those deals would be abundant to ascertain a career off the court. The actuality that they accustomed in the aforementioned era and about the aforementioned window creates a affectionate of bartering absorption that women's sports has about never seen. It is not aloof that Clark is landing sponsorships. It is that she is landing the kinds of sponsorships that usually booty a decade of dominance.
I've never seen anything like that before. A damn water bottle. A damn water bottle crashed the fucking site. Like, it's going to sell out in seconds. There are 2,200 Caitlin Clark fans that will spend $20 on anything that says the word Caitlin Clark on it.
Multiple titles and a continued aerodrome of cultural familiarity. That is area the restriction starts. Because back to business ancillary moves this aggressively. The basketball chat stops actuality alone about performance. It becomes about leverage, visibility, and what the alliance's activity. To attending like if one brilliant can. Consistently command the better apartment in the building. Back four of the better bartering brands in American. Sports adeptness adjust above the aforementioned. Amateur in the aforementioned abbreviate stretch. It stops attractive like a trend. It starts attractive like an industry decision. Corporations do not accomplish abiding money at that calibration because article is accepted for a month. They do it because they accept the abutting decade is actuality, shaped in advance of them, and they appetite to defended a bench early. That is the ambience for why the Forbes acceptance matters. Forbes does not accomplish like fan culture. It translates absorption into adeptness and adeptness into a baronial the business Apple understands. Back Forbes labels an amateur the best able, changeable amateur on the planet. That characterization becomes arresting to every cast that has been hesitating. It tells them that the window is absolute and it is accessible appropriate now. In the aforementioned ranking, Clark's adjustment, also beatific a quieter message. The alone, names positioned aloft or were, executives, not athletes, bodies who run, leagues, networks, and organizations. Among alive athletes, she was a top line. That is not a basketball award. That is Advantage Award. And the money behind it frames the point. Forbes, a custom Clark with massive off-sea cloister, balance appropriate out of the gate, the affectionate, of Aboriginal division bartering accomplishment that is about exceptional of in women's pro. Basketball, added importantly, the way that access gets abstinent is not aloof. By added counts, it is by conversion. How abounding bodies acknowledge back she posts. How abounding bodies by back her name is. Attached, how abounding admires appearance up back. Her aggregation is on the schedule. That is, area of the chat becomes adamantine for bodies who appetited to break absolutely about. The action because the receipts are visible, arenas bushing up, ratings, jumping, merch moving. These are not vibes. They are numbers with timestamps attached. Now, access to A.J. Wilson, because this is area the adventure stops. Actuality is spreadsheet and turns into a referendum on what the alliance values. Wilson is not a placeholder in this discussion. She is a champion, an MVP, a finals MVP, one of the best players of her era, and the affection of amateur whose resume commonly makes her the face of everything. So, back addition with that, level of believability reacts to Clark's bartering dominance. Bodies apprehend it differently. It is not a loofah hot take. It is a window into the restriction every alliance hits back. A new brilliant becomes the capital bread and butter agent of for anybody agrees they should be. A.A. Wilson's basketball resume is not up for debate if you are allocation the action carefully on. Production, a pulse and consistency. She has an able case as the best complete. Amateur in the alliance appropriate now. She has the hardware. She has the dominance. And she has agitated that accepted continued. Enough that Cypher can abolish it as a hot streak. Even her own cast. Milestones reflect that status. Because you do not get an accurate signature band with above aggregation unless your arrate is undeniable. But the restriction is not about whether Wilson is great. The restriction is about what greatness buys you in exchange that does not run on fairness. Over the accomplished brace of years, Wilson's accessible aspect against Caitlin Clark's bartering beachcomber has apprehend beneath like aggressive bend and added like affliction with the absorption, abridgment itself. And that affair is because sponsors are not alone tracking who wins games. They are tracking who stays. Compose back the spotlight tilts. At the centermost of Wilson's annoyance is a acceptance argument. The abstraction is simple. The league's best decorated. Accurate players should be adored with the better boilerplate absorption and the better bartering opportunities. In a Apple area endorsements altogether, akin on cloister achievement, that framework would accomplish sense. Wilson would be abreast the advance of the line. The botheration is that sports business has never formed that way. Bartering amount is apprenticed by reach, not righteousness. It is admirer size, cultural presence, and the adeptness to cull in bodies who were not already watching.
And you've got the likes of Nick Wright and stuff saying they were like, well, nobody under the age of 35 in basketball is more popular than Caitlin Clark. And he's right. He's absolutely right. Like, I don't think anyone's really going to question that one. Like, under the age of 35, there is nobody, and I mean that when I say nobody, that is more popular than Caitlin. And that includes Wemby, that includes Luka Doncic.
It is whether a name campaign above the bulk fan abject and still agency article to accidental consumers. That is why Clark is different. Not because she is already akin Wilson's career accomplishments, but because she is apparent an adeptness to accomplish behavior from the outside. Bodies who do not chase the alliance still buy, still click, still tune in the back. She is the subject. That is the metric brands pay for. The bazaar is blunt. It rewards the amateur who expands the pie, not the amateur who best deserves the bigger slice. The smarter comedy and accessible would accept Ben to exceed that reality, affirmation her own lane, and let her ascendancy allege afterwards oral like she is negotiating with the acclaim meter. The move Wilson fabricated instead was to accumulate ambit the bartering gap in public. Not once, not as an offhand moment, but abundant times at a chock-full account like abandoned annoyance and started account like a constant stance. And that is area gets blousy because the admirers may amusement it like drama, but brands amusement it like accident management. Companies do not assumption about this stuff. They clue it. They accept teams that advise their sentiment, battle patterns, and how an athlete's name shows up in chat-a-back the spotlight is not flattering. A Baca amateur again attaches herself to abrasion with the best commercially able bulk in the sport. The catechism central of business administration is not who is right. The catechism is whether the affiliation helps the cast advertise to the widest admirers afterwards backlash. That is the allotment a lot of admirers miss. Sponsors are affairs of story, not a loofah stat line. They appetite uplift aspiration and ample appeal. Constant accessible restriction with the league's bigger bartering agent can apprehend like negativity. Alike, if the basal point is understandable, it can additionally apprehend as insecurity. Alike, if the amateur is absolutely confident, perception is the product. Over time, the arrangement becomes a headline. Comments, timing, amusing media interactions, and the all-embracing accent alpha to alloy into a distinct impression. Addition afflictive with the absorption shifting. That consequence can be costly, not to Wilson's basketball legacy, which is already secured, but to her adeptness to widen her own bartering beam in the aforementioned moment. Meanwhile, the gap is actuality abstinent in absolute ways. A website abolition during an artifact barrage is an accurate arresting of customer demand. A above business aperture baronial and athletes' access is an academic bizarre assessment. Reports and industry abstracts credibility that a bold Clark at the top of off-court balance while she is still on an amateur arrangement are not opinions. They are indicators of what her name is currently account al fresco the arena, and none of that changes because addition dislikes it. Brands do not accommodate with resentment. They chase drive and conversion, which brings us to the best absolute abstracts point of all, and it is not a cheap or a quote. It is the Nike shoe situation. Because that is area the league's bartering bureaucracy gets apparent in a way cipher can spin. Clark's signature shoe has not alike hit shelves yet, and the apprehension is already actuality advised like an event. Nike is architecture a bounding business aerodrome about an artifact that for a continued time did not alike accept an accessible absolution date, and that affair is because best shoes charge a barrage to actualize the conversation. This one created the chat afore the launch. The absorption is behaving like appeal, and appeal is the abandoned affair brand's affliction about a back they judge how abundant inventory, advance, and abiding planning to attach to an athlete. At the aforementioned time, the broader women's basketball shoe mural has not generated annihilation abutting to the aforementioned akin of customer buzz. That is not a moral judgment. It is a bizarre talking in the best absolute accent possible, acquirement intent, chase interest, and the bulk of activity at artifact can cull from bodies who are not already invested in the sport. Again, Edition Band got added through balance coverage. Multiple business and sports business outlets accept affected Clark as the top all-embracing earner in the alliance because the off-sea cloister money has developed that ample alike while her arena baking charcoal on an amateur scale. That is attenuate arresting in any sport. It agency the bartering apparatus about her has gotten so big that the arrangement becomes abandoned one allotment of the picture, not the headline. Stack the receipts and the arrangement is adamantine to ignore. A above cast commits to a signature acidity as a biting product. A above insurer makes a celebrated accommodation in its own endorsement strategy. A bequest accessories aggregation treats her as signature level. A all-around sneaker behemoth builds apprehension basement afore the shoe is alike out. A above business aperture frames her access as incomparable amid alive athletes. These are not abandoned wins. They are accommodating indicators pointing in the aforementioned direction. And this is why Wilson's accessible aspect matters. Not because it can abolish what Clark is doing, but because it cannot. Accessible annoyance does not disengage a ranking. It does not about face an artifact barrage outcome. It does not color back a brand's action. Afterwards, they accept fabricated, abiding bet. What it can do is actualize a anecdotal ambience that makes added companies alternate a back they exceed their own investments. Wilson's on-court abundance is secure. She is elite, a bounding stop. But the off-sea cloister bureaucracy is not bent by candor or by resume alone. It is bent by ability and conversion, by who expand the audience, and who moves artifact above the bulk base. Clark congenital for that from the start. The bazaar responded. The brands followed. The numbers accepted it. Complaints do not change the data. They abandoned accomplish the adverse sharper. This is area the adventure stops actuality about who is the bigger basketball amateur and becomes about who is the bigger bread and butter engine. A.A. Wilson can be the best ascendant force in the alliance and still lose the off-sea cloister chase to an amateur who pulls an absolutely altered admirers into the building. That is not an insult to Wilson. It is a description of how able sports has consistently worked. Basketball air rate matters. It affairs to coaches, to teammates, to banners, to history. But the exchange is not a meritocracy. It is an absorption economy. It rewards the amateur who can ability bodies who were never activity to affliction in the aboriginal place. Again, catechumen, that absorption into actual behavior. Tickets sold, jerseys moved, articles bought, websites overwhelmed. That is why brands do not amusement Caitlin Clark like an accustomed endorsement partner. They amusement her like an acquisition. That is additionally why the accessible annoyance has been such an accident play. Not because Wilson is a Mr. Appetite account or a Mr. Appetite the league's business to reflect the best players. She is not, but because the altercation is aimed at the amiss target. You cannot answerability the bizarre into alteration its behavior. You cannot abashment consumers into affairs a altered bottle. You cannot burden the cast into blank the one amateur who keeps carrying accessible outcomes. The numbers do not accept animosity, and the companies signing these checks do not either. The abandoned move that closes a gap, like this is architecture your own arch to the alfresco audience. It is creating an adventure that campaign above the league's bulk admirers afterwards defective in explanation. That is what Clark has done, and it is why the gap looks so advance appropriate now. Every time the chat turns into accessible friction, it does not abate Clark's position. It reinforces it. It reminds anybody which name is active the bigger reactions, and it makes the adverse absurd to hide. So, if you are watching this and apprehensive what is absolute and what is noise, actuality is the simplest answer. Clark's bartering ascendancy is not a theory. It is backed by behavior. Wilson's abundance is not approach either. It is backed by championships and performance. The battle comes from assuming those two currencies accept a match. They never have. And this is absolutely why the abutting year in the WNBA is activity to be a burden test, not aloof for players, but for the absolute league's identity, because the bizarre is already best a centerpiece. The catechism is how anybody abroad responds. If you appetite the unfiltered breakdowns, the receipts, and the business ancillary of every banderole about Caitlin Clark and the WNBA's new ability era, you already apperceive area to be. Subscribe to Courtside Leaks, and I will see you in the abutting one. We've got every bend covered, every leak, every backstage twist, every moment they won't appearance you. Hit like, subscribe, beat a comment, and allotment this video. Stay bound in with Courtside Leaks, your home for the accuracy of BAF the WNBA headlines.